Welcome everybody to Mom Street USA. My name is Kate, aka the Disney Cicerone, and with me as always is my beautiful co-host Jackie, aka Wishes Mama. So tonight we're going to talk about probably the thing that we get asked the most is, when should I plan a Disney trip? When should I go to Disney? And we're going to do it within the context of when is maybe the best weather, and also when is it crowded / not crowded. And this is a tough one because there's so many factors. So many different things to figure out. And a lot of this even, I feel like, has shifted in the past 3 to 4 years post the world changing with everything. So it's kind of hard to predict, but we have done our best and done some research and polled different places who have also done their research. And hopefully we can provide you with some good information today. Yes, we're going to talk both about Disney World and Disneyland, and we're going to mention which one we're talking about at any given time, just to let you know. But they'll be integrated throughout, so you can just as we go. And I will say that I do go to Disneyland and Disney World year round. I usually try to go every other month to either Disneyland or Disney World. So I feel like I've been doing this long enough now that I have a pretty good sense of like what my favorite months are, my favorite times are to go to both, which is really helpful to give some context to this. But Jackie just plans stuff all the time, so she just knows a lot from that. So
it's true. And I've got a pretty good spread of when I've been. I feel like I've been almost every month. I think maybe except for December.
Yeah. I finally went to December these past 2 years. Is the first trips I've taken in December because I just avoided it.
Right. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't blame you.
Yeah. So, So that being said, we're going to dig into this in a kind of a methodical way. First, we're going to talk about crowd calendars, and then we're going to talk about weather, and then we're going to kind of move month per month and kind of tell you maybe some of the things that are going on in each of those months for you to consider as you plan your Disney trip. So, yes.
And I will mention before we jump in that a lot of this knowledge comes from just Kate and I, but we did reference both Undercover Tourist and Touring Plans. So shout out to them. We feel like they've been in this game long enough. We trust to an extent, and we'll get into that here in just a moment, kind of their information that they've got. So those are two of the different locations that we have pulled information from. So shout out to them.
Yeah, and I have used Touring Plans for years. I'm not an affiliate with them in any way. I just love them. So, and I think they've done a lot of updating of their apps recently that are really, really positive ways. So kudos to them for keeping up with all the changes that Disney has made too, with a lot of the lighting lanes and everything. So brilliant for that.
So and I will say just briefly with Undercover Tourist, that's who I used like way back when I used to first start consulting all of the crowd calendars and things like that. And I feel like they've also been very consistent, kind of adapting and changing throughout. So like I said, they've both of those locations have been in this game for decades. Yeah. So they're pretty reliable sources, and Touring Plans, I've liked them. They are a subscription service, so you do have to pay a little fee for it, but I like them that they're very scientific about what they do. I don't know that much about Undercover Tourist. I have used them in the past, but I know for Touring Plans, they said they've compiled data for over 14 years, and they use a lot of those things. So let's start with the crowd calendar in terms of let's just do a little overview of crowd calendars, what they are, how we're using them, are they reliable? Let's start there. Jackie? Perfect. Yes, I think that's helpful to start there. So what in the world are we talking about when it comes to crowd calendars? Basically, crowd calendars there are probably dozens of different websites that have compiled information based on what they've observed themselves or seen or heard or, witnessed online of just varying dates and times of the year that are most busy, least busy, somewhere in the middle. And there's lots of different ways that these locations will compile this information. Some of it's color-coded. Most of it probably is color-coded, honestly. Or they'll rank it from 1 to 10 or things like that. So there's lots of different ways that they compile the information. But basically, it gives you a snapshot of what that month is anticipated to be like when it comes to crowds.
Yeah.
It's not always perfect. It's never going to be perfect because you just can't predict it. But it kind of gives you a general overview of what it's anticipated to look like for any particular week or month throughout the year.
Yeah. So you can see, like, this is an example of touring plans, and I don't want to give you too much of theirs just because it is behind a paywall, but you can see that they give you kind of a number from 1 to 10 based on the crowds. That's pretty typical of how these would work. And then they also give you kind of like per park, which, you know, what they expect per park. And then they'll also give you some information on like what's going on that might be impacting crowds as well, which is really handy for those of you who don't have the entire schedule of Walt Disney World memorized, you know. So
right. And let me give you just there we go. I don't do this often, but so then this is an example of what the undercover tourist one looks like. Theirs is more kind of calendar based and color coded. So they've got a key up here that's got green and then yellow and then red. And then you can see kind of, this is just their predictions for March. So you can see kind of how that works. And then they've got all of the parks listed underneath here as well. So
yeah,
a couple
really
different options.
Kind of color coded. Mm-hmm.
Yes, very much. And a couple different options of how, there we go. Sorry. of how they kind of organize the information that can be helpful. Again, some people are better with a calendar view and might like the look of that one. Some people maybe just want the basic numbers like Kate showed on touring plans. So lots of different options. And like I said, there are dozens of them that are out in the world if you search Disney crowd calendar. So be cautious about the ones that you choose. And I would always suggest looking at multiple because everyone's going to have a little bit of a differing opinion on what is crowded and what is not.
Yeah, no. And it's the really interesting thing about crowd calendars is that they're not always going to be 100% accurate. So you can't be like, I'm going to go this week because it says it's going to be 2s and 3s and 4s the whole week and it'll be great, because it just doesn't work that way. There's a lot of times something random will happen. Disney will add an event before you go or something, or it's just randomly busy. Like people just happen to
for no
go
reason.
That day for no reason. It's very, very hard to predict. And I think something we all say now is like, there's no such thing as a slow season anymore. And I think that's true. It used to be like you go in the winter time and the off season outside of the holidays, and it was pretty slow and you could usually get on a lot of rides, and that just doesn't exist anymore. So if you haven't planned a Disney trip in a long time, just brace yourself, because that's not how it is.
Right. Well, and I think, our culture, so to speak, has shifted so much to so many people are able to work remotely or work from home. And so they have more flexibility when it comes to taking these trips, because we're seeing also, I feel like, an upswing of people working in the parks and at the resorts too. So they're able to take that work on the road with them and enjoy the parks when they're not working. So we do see a lot more of just there's very little fluctuation week to week on those suspected off weeks.
Right. And, it's like people are just like, well, we thought all like the revenge travel was over. And it was like, well, for some, maybe it's not for others. And maybe some people are just like, they're just not worried as much about just traveling as parents, just traveling when their kids are out of school. Maybe they're like, life's too short. I'm going to take my kid out of school when I need to and go, and not worry about it. I feel like this is like our attitude has changed, and that has then impacted our behavior towards how we travel. Maybe it's just
no, I absolutely agree. And so that's why we always want to caution that, yes, crowd calendars can be super helpful, but they should not be your end all be all reason that you decide to go a certain week. Unless you find 7 crowd calendars that all say the exact same thing, even then, chances are good. However, it's never a guarantee. You never know what the general public is doing. So
right. So that being said, that's they're helpful, but they're not. Use them. Take it for a grain of salt. It's like okay, well, that I'll probably lean towards that. But there are some things that we know are always going to be busy in the parks. Have always been busy in the parks, except for like that weird one year when everything was like light crowds and the world was crazy. But like one of those things is holidays. Holidays are almost always super busy in the parks. There are some exceptions for like lesser holidays, like Mother's Day, Father's Day aren't quite as bad. But things like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Easter, spring break, which is
4th of July.
Spring break's not a holiday, but it's like a whole season that it's just always busy.
Yeah. 4th of July, Halloween, too, all of those kind of just... If you're really, truly trying to avoid the crowds, avoid holidays.
Yeah. And then we'll talk more specifically Walt Disney World versus Disneyland strategies for things, too, because they aren't the same in the way that they behave because of Disneyland being a locals park, Walt Disney World mostly being a vacation destination. So they are different in that way. I think that's everything for both. Do we want to start diving into Walt Disney World specific?
Yeah. So we are going to talk about, like Kate mentioned, kind of general overview for both parks. And then we will here momentarily get into, like, we're going to go month by month and give you guys that information. But as far as Walt Disney World goes, a couple just kind of general things to keep in mind. A lot of these are going to be about summer, just by the nature of Florida. So if you go in the summer for Walt Disney World, you can anticipate having longer operating hours in the park. So that is something to keep in mind. Winter will typically have those shorter hours unless it's holiday time. So you're going to get those extended hours during the holidays. But other than that, you're going to get a shorter amount of time that you're able to be in the parks if you're going during the winter. Which
like
may
9
not be
to 9, like 12 hours ish. Yeah. Maybe less than Animal Kingdom.
Right. Yeah. Well, and a lot of the times you'll get like an 8 to 5 in Animal Kingdom or an 8 to 6. So just if that's not something that you're overly concerned about because you're not a park open to park closed person, then it may not matter to you. But that is something to keep in mind when you're looking at the time of year that you want to go. If you're looking for those late nights that some of us love in the parks, the summer is going to be the best time to get those late hours unless you're paying for an extra event or something like that.
I do see some comments about the weather in the summer, and we are going to get there because that's the other part of this is the weather. But we're going to talk about crowds first. So this part's mostly crowd specific. Then we will get to the weather for sure.
Yeah. And yes, they do tie together. We understand that, and we totally get where you're coming from. But it's hard to talk about all of it all at one time. We have to figure out a way to organize it for you guys. Yeah. So as far as those hours, Disney World will extend hours if they think that the parks are going to be more crowded. So you will find even up to the week of or the day of, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, sometimes literally even day of, if they get a higher number of people in park attendance that day, they will extend the hours by an hour or two. If they get more reservations that come in that week, they're going to extend those hours by an hour or two. So always keep checking those park hours literally up until the morning of.
Yeah. And I'm, again, not affiliated with touring plans, but I do like that they will, because if you put your trip in and you have all your information in there, they will ping you if like the crowd levels go up and or if they change the hours, they will automatically send you a message about it so that you know that Disney has changed the hours on it, which it's terribly helpful. And it's saved me a couple times because when they bump it back and it's earlier, I'm like, oh, I got to get up an hour earlier now. So
Right. Yeah. Especially if you want to make that rope drop or you're planning to use that early entry time to your advantage from being on property, you want to make sure you know when that park is going to open.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
Yeah. So if you see your park day operating hours extend, just brace for a busier day, anticipate a little bit longer lines. Just be ready for it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So summer can have lower crowds like July and August because, but it is super hot, which we'll talk about more of that in a minute, like I said. But because it's July, August, it's still like a peak travel time for family. I'd say probably more July than August now because some people, it's so weird because on the West Coast, like we don't start school till after Labor Day. But I know like a lot of the country starts in August, which is I'm so not used to that. I was like, oh, everybody's starting school already.
Yeah, we start usually like the second week of August.
Yeah, that's so early. Like we don't start till after like The first week of September, like never.
But when do you guys get out at the end of the year?
Like first or second week of June. So.
See, and we're out before Memorial Day.
Oh, that makes sense.
So
yeah, distributed.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, I mean, that in that sense, then June, July, August, summer months can be a little bit more crowded. I would say that it's a little bit more crowded at Disneyland than it is at Disney World because the weather is just like, it's hot. It's definitely hot in Southern California in the summer, but it's like a dry heat and it just doesn't feel as awful.
Miserable.
Miserable. Yes.
Sticky, gross, any of those adjectives that you want to use to describe the summer in Orlando.
So I would say that they definitely have a lot of incentives to get people to go in the summer. We see that a lot of Disney offering discounts, discounted tickets, discounted hotels, dining plans, anything they can throw at you to try to get you to go in those months because they know that people don't want to travel there then because it's awful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they're not wrong. And that is another thing to also mention that we have seen a lot, especially recently in the past maybe 2 years, is that Disney will start to roll out these really good resort deals, dining plan, ticket deals for those summer months because they're anticipating a slower attendance.
Yeah.
So when you
can
start
to see who's booked, they can see how far it is, and they're like, "Oh, we only have certain percentage book. We need to bump that up. So let's offer some incentive for that." Yeah. Yeah.
So when you see those deals, they may be really great deals, which is awesome. However, just anticipate that there are a lot of other people's also getting those deals. That's what happened. I believe it was like the end of January, just this past January.
Yeah.
They had really, really good deals post like Run Disney before like Valentine's Day, like in those couple of weeks, and they had really crazy good resort deals, dining. They had like free dining deals and all sorts of stuff, and the crowds were crazy packed.
Yeah,
which is not normal for that time of year. So Disney definitely manipulates it. They definitely look to give those different deals and incentives to get people there.
Yeah, and I have someone asking, how do we find out about the deals? Where are they posted? Do you want to mention that, Jackie?
Yeah, so for Disney World, if you're looking for the deals that they have, the best place is to just go right onto the Walt Disney World website. And I'm going to double check exactly what the wording is. So when I tell you, I can tell you correctly. So it's just Disney World website. And then along the top, it will give you like a bunch of different options and menus for a breakdown with that. And if you go to places to stay, and then over there's it's like a double column that will drop down if you like hover over places to stay. The right hand side, what did it just clicked something for me that was not helpful. I was reading that.
Hey.
But on the right hand side of that drop down menu, they're going to list a couple of like the options that they have. But if you click view special offers, then it will take you to the page that will list them all for you. You're also, just keep in mind, you're going to see like DVC offers, AP offers, Florida resident offers, Disney Plus subscriber offers, Disney Chase Visa offers. So they may not all apply to you, but that's going to be the best place to see kind of the rundown of the offers that they have. The other thing you can do is reach out to a travel agent. They're going to be able to tell you exactly what's being offered in the moment.
Yep.
So that would be the easiest way, if I'm being completely honest, would be to reach out to a travel agent to ask them.
Yeah. Travel agents are really nice too, in that they will continue to watch for deals even after you've booked. And sometimes they can get you the deal that pops up if they need to, which is really nice benefit that you don't have to keep paying attention to that because they're on it, which is nice.
Yes, exactly.
I did have a question that was, can you bundle things like a Disney card discount and a Disney Plus member discount, or can you? And I want to say most often you can't. You usually choose one, and that's kind
correct.
Of where you have to go.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen them bundle like that. However, they do. I mean, you'll be able to tell which one is the best deal for you based on where you're staying and what discounts are available. And some will be room only deals, some will be package deals, some will, so there's varying different options when it comes to that. But I've never seen any of the discounts stack on top of each other like that.
Neither have I. I do have a question from Ryan. Why does Animal Kingdom have shorter hours compared to other parks? And that is a pretty simple question. It's because of the animals. Because the animals go to bed, or they're tired or peopled out, or it's mostly because of the needs of the animals. So they want to make sure that they have the environment that they need to be safe and comfortable and happy. So that's the long and short of it. The animals.
Yep. Yes, so that's why you see, especially in winter then too, they will do those even shorter hours, because they shorten hours just like the other parks do, but they're already working off of shorter hours. So unfortunately, their hours get quite a bit shorter in the winter.
Which is a bummer, because you don't get to see like Pandora at night lit up, which is one of my favorite things. It's beautiful.
It's so pretty there. And the Tree of Life, when they light up the Tree of Life, is so pretty. I know, it's unfortunate. But again, it's one of those things where like you understand reluctantly, because you want it to be, you want to have that nighttime experience. But
yeah, it is what it is.
The animals,
take care of the animals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very important.
So if you do end up going to during one of these busy times, and you're anticipating it being a busy time, be sure, and you've heard us say this before, be sure to have your must-do list completed before you get to the parks. And that must-do list is basically just a poll of the people in your travel party, find out what their top priority ride is at whatever park you're going to. That will help you kind of streamline what lines you're going to wait in, what lines you're going to skip, what you're going to try and use Genie Plus for, or do virtual queues or individual lightning lanes or any of that kind of stuff. Have that ready to go. So that way you're not wasting time trying to do that. You could be planning that and figuring that out while you're waiting in line for something.
Right. Piggybacking on what you said, Jackie, if you're going during busy times, make a plan to do things to keep kids occupied in lines, which we have talked about before. That was our episode 2, Packing for Disney. We talked a little bit about that. I feel like we should do another refresher of that sometime.
Probably.
Soon, like an episode dedicated to what to do while waiting in line besides just being on your phone, which most of us are, but still.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. We'll add that to the list.
So then also during hot months, you want to make sure you're planning your clothing appropriately. Wear quick drying material, or swimsuits if needed. Are you assuming for kids, for adults? Elaborate, Jackie. You put that in there.
So that was a suggestion we actually got on our Discord from our friend Christina. She had mentioned that if she knows that it's going to be really miserable out, especially if she knows they're going to be hitting up water rides or different like splash pads, things like that. She'll do swimsuits and then also bring like a change of clothes too.
Yeah.
So that way you have the ability, and if your kiddos get wet, it's not wet jeans. Not that you'd really be wearing jeans in the heat, but you get the idea. It's not their uncomfortable clothes if they get wet
in the heat.
No.
Like, oh,
yeah,
no.
Don't do that. But it'll give them some more flexibility to maybe be okay with it. Because like I know, even just thinking about my kiddos and some of their sensitivities, my oldest would not be okay going into a splash pad without his swimsuit on.
Interesting.
Like even if we told him it was okay, I think he would not be okay with it.
He's like, no, I'm in my regular clothes. What are you
it would totally, he wouldn't be able to handle that. So I think if that applies to you, or even if you can get like, they have like SPF like shirts that are kind of like half swim shirts, half like just like that dry wicking material, something like that to help you just stay cool and dry quickly if you do get wet from water rides and or sweat.
Right. No, that's actually a really great tip. And I think, so we're mostly referring to children wear swimsuits. We're not advocating for you wear your swimsuit to the park. No. But I mean, you could wear like one of those swim shirts that wick like we're talking about, but a full coverage,
yes.
Be in dress code for Disney.
Yes. Or if you're going to wear it underneath with like a t-shirt over top, that you could change out the t-shirt if you needed to, or something like that. But yes, we want to make sure everyone is covered appropriately for sure.
Right. I was just like, wait a minute. We're wearing swimsuits now? I missed the memo.
No. That's not exactly what we meant.
Not be wearing my swimsuit.
No.
Just saying.
I'm not a water ride person, so no, I will not either. So talking about Disney in the heat, just briefly want to mention that we did an entire episode on prepping for Disney in the heat, which was episode 32. So if you want more, we are going to talk a little bit kind of as we go through, but if you want like full episode, all of our tips and tricks, that is the one that you want to go looking for. So we're probably not going to dive too much into extensive Disney in the heat information tonight.
Yeah, that's true. So, you might be saying then, what is the best time to visit Walt Disney World? And we wish that we could give you like, these are the exact perfect times to go where you won't have any crowds. And obviously we can't, nobody can predict that. But I know that per Undercover Tourist, there's a couple that you found that I would agree with these that you found here. Do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So basically the way Undercover Tourist kind of hashes things out, like I showed you, they use like a green, yellow, red. There are like maybe 10 days that are green on their calendar. So just keep that in mind. So the majority of these are going to be in that yellow range, but they're going to have lesser crowds than what is considered a crowded day at Disney, if that makes sense. So early March, before we get into spring break crowds, early May, so after spring break, before Memorial Day, August and September, again, that's September before the Halloween festivities start. So you kind of got to find those in-betweens, but typically after the first week of August all the way through the end of September, generally speaking, there is Labor Day in there, so avoid Labor Day, but other than that, you kind of have some good weeks in there. And then early November before the holidays, and then early December between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So generally speaking, those in theory, to our best guessing ability, are going to be good times to be able to go.
Yeah. And I would say Kalia, I'm saying your name wrong, but they're saying how's Walt Disney World during the 4th of July? And actually, it's like, I would say it's actually not that bad in terms of holidays go. Like, it's not as busy as a lot of others. It's still a little elevated because it's a holiday.
Yeah. I haven't been 4th of July in a long time. It used to be really, really bad. It used to hit capacity at Magic Kingdom and all of that. But I agree. I don't know that it does anymore. But the thing that will get you is they've got special fireworks shows for 4th of July. So the evenings, like dinner and on, are going to be really crowded because locals are going to come just for those special fireworks shows. And people are going to plan their trips around those. So keep that in mind. But
yeah,
through the morning and mid-afternoon, not quite as bad.
No, and I was looking at the crowd calendars for both Disneyland and Disney World for that time. And I think it is a blockout date for some of the pass holders in Disneyland. But I don't think it is for Disney World. I feel like the crowd calendars say it's only like a 5 or 6, which actually isn't that bad for a holiday.
Yeah.
So take that for what it's worth. I would say think because of Walt Disney World, because it's the summer, because it's really hot in July, I think it's just not as crowded as some of the other holidays would be.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you won't have elevated crowds because it's a holiday. So
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that. Okay, so some other sorry,
before we move on, I have a couple of comments here. Eric says we went the first week of March in 2022 and 2024 and it wasn't too hot or crazy crowded. So kind of confirming early March is a good time to go. And Emily said, I found Labor Day to not be bad. So maybe a good Labor Day time. I feel like Labor Day is really hit or miss. It's like sometimes it's really crowded and sometimes it's not. And it just is like very, very hard to predict. Like Christmas, is always going to be slammed. Right. Thanksgiving, always slammed. But Labor Day is like another one of those was like, oh, it could be. It depends on how many people decided to go there that year,
Right. Well, and Labor Day is such an interesting time of year because it's so close to so many kids have just started school or are just getting ready to start school that you probably don't see as many of those big family vacations. But you may see more short weekend trips, things like that. So probably midweek would be less crowded. So Labor Day's on Monday. I would say Wednesday, Thursday of that week are going to be pretty slow, but you may see, leading up into Labor Day be a little bit busier.
Yeah. I have a note that said they went to Disneyland in 2022 during 4th of July, and it was okay. So I feel like I've been around 4th of July, but never on 4th of July. But I've never, we watch the crowds kind of, there's always like Disney content creators reporting on the crowds on the holidays or whatnot. And, you have to take it with a grain of salt too, because some people kind of exaggerate depending on what they're doing.
Right.
But the reputable ones, I would say that report honestly seem to be like, I haven't ever seen massive crowds, at least not in quite a few years for 4th of July, personally. So.
Yeah, the last time I went for 4th of July was 2014. So it's been it's been a while. So like I said, when we went that year, it was really, really busy. Really busy.
Yeah, and so we have a comment too from Sarah about spring break. It was so crazy everywhere this last week, spring break. It's true. Like the week before that in Walt Disney World was like empty.
Yeah.
Crazy
It was
empty.
between breaks. Yep.
Yeah. So, and spring break's really, really hard to predict too, because it depends on so many factors. How many people are traveling there? It depends on what part of the country's having spring break at any given time, because
and when Easter is, that's the major one. When Easter falls makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
In when those spring break weeks are, because I think it's next year. And we'll get into this a little bit later because I did look it up. Next year, I think Easter is really late. It's like the 3rd week of April.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to see. So spring break crowds next year are going to be really weird.
Yeah, that is strange.
And really hard to predict and really hard to figure out. I know it's in April for sure. I know I have the date written when we get there later. But yeah, it's there. That's the hard thing about spring break time. And all of this to be said, we have more to go with crowd calendars, but all this to be said, if you only have a couple weeks to pick from, you should still go. Just plan accordingly. We are by no means saying don't go when it's super crowded and don't go on the holidays. If that's the only time you can go. But you have to be aware of what it's going to be like to be able to plan accordingly.
Yeah, go. It will help you adjust your expectations of you and also the party that you're traveling with and be like, look, it's going to be probably really crowded when we go. Maybe we're going to budget for Genie Plus. Maybe we're going to say, well, we're not going to get to do everything. We're just going to aim to do these like 5 rides that we really want to do in the day, and anything else is like extra, and like it helps you to go in with a different mentality of like, oh, we're going to do everything. And it's like, well, you probably won't get to do that when it's super crowded. You get to do a lot, but not everything.
Right. Yes, so, exactly. Yeah. Okay, did we get through all of your questions that you had over on your end? I don't want to miss anyone if we had any more right now.
I do have a comment from Amy. It says we went last week and it was perfect. Crowds were minimal. So that was the week of the 3 to the 17th. So, and also Easter 2025 is April 20th. So thanks, Ryan, for that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. See, it's super late.
Yeah, it's very late.
Okay. Yeah, so let's talk just a few other general Disney World park tips. We got to keep going. We have a lot more information to tell you guys.
We do. Yeah.
So just a few things for each park. Magic Kingdom. Avoid Magic Kingdom on Mondays if you can. And Magic Kingdom is actually a pretty good option on weekends, surprisingly. That's been the recent trend that we've seen over the last several months. Sundays especially, Saturdays as well, but Sundays especially, because a lot of people I think are coming in on Sundays and they're not going to the parks as frequently on those days. The other thing to keep in mind is if it's a time of year when they do parties, so like the Halloween party or the Christmas party, those days at Magic Kingdom, the mornings are typically really, really slow. So those are really good times to go if you are visiting during that time of year.
Right.
For Epcot, the opposite is true. It is very busy on weekends because a lot of locals like to go into Epcot to do festivals and eat and grab a drink with friends or things like that. So through the weekend in the mornings, not terrible. And Epcot is further spread out than some of the other park areas. So it's a lot nicer, even if it is kind of crowded. It doesn't feel as claustrophobic, so to speak, as some of the other parks do.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, and I also would say the beginnings of festivals at Epcot can always be a busier time as well. So just take in a note if it's a festival has recently begun in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It tends to be a little bit more crowded in general in Epcot than, and also if you don't really care about the festivals that much, if it's like that's not your thing, you just want to go for maybe the rides, the attractions, I would recommend going to what I call Diet Epcot, which is the time between festivals. Sometimes it's a couple weeks between festivals, and there's definitely a lot lower crowds then because people aren't prioritizing it because there's no festival going on.
Yes.
So definitely a good for people who aren't necessarily interested in the festival stuff so much as just the park itself.
So true. Hollywood Studios is kind of just its own kind of monster. It is pretty much always busy. No matter what, there's no day of the week that it's not. Just the way that the park is set up and the way that the e-ticket attractions are and all of that. It's just kind of always a busy park. The one thing I will mention with Hollywood Studios is if you've got an evening you're going there and that evening has 2 showings of Fantasmic, try to plan to go to the later one because you will get a little bit lower crowds during the first showing of Fantasmic. But that's pretty much the only time that I can say that the crowds kind of are lower overall. Now, if you're there on a week that's super slow, obviously it's going to follow suit. But there's no trends day to day necessarily with Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is that sometimes, the Hollywood Studios can be slower in the evenings, and that was even true before they had Fantasmic came back. It was just like sometimes it just would slow down. I think it's less. I think more people are staying for Fantasmic now than they used to. It used to be people at that park would just kind of clear out because there was no nighttime show. And then the evenings were great because everything was like so. Yeah. But now it's like you have to kind of catch it when Fantasmic is going on if you want lesser lines. And you can find some ones sometimes, like if it's a slower day, like Rise of Resistance will go down to like less than 30 minutes, during that time. But not always. So don't quote me on that.
Yes, so true. Yeah. And then as far as Animal Kingdom goes, it is just overall typically the slowest park. But again, it's got more space. So it's kind of just going to feel that way regardless because there's lots of walking paths and things that people can explore at Animal Kingdom. It is best in the early morning, and it does typically have a really early start in comparison. So on a lot of days that you see a 9 a.m. open for the majority of the other parks, Animal Kingdom probably has an 8 a.m. open. So keep that in mind. If you can get there early, you're going to be able to get through a lot of rides early in the morning. It's just the nature of that park. And then also later in the evenings too. But again, you have to watch that closing time. But if it closes at 6 or 7 and you go there around 3 or 4, your crowds are going to be a lot lower. So that mid-morning to mid-afternoon is the busiest time typically for Animal Kingdom, and that's almost every day.
Yeah, that's true. And that park is better when it's cooler out. So
yes,
I would say, because it does have a lot of shade, but it also kind of like retains a lot of the humidity. So
yes,
it's nice when
it just gets trapped under those trees.
So the other thing is that things like parties, we kind of mentioned this, things like parties and after hours events can alter crowd levels at the specific park. And also the others. So be sure to, check for any events that are happening before you go. And like we said, Magic Kingdom is a great one to go to on party nights during the day because that usually it's pretty empty because everybody just decides to go, when they can get in for the party. Then it starts getting busier and then you should either park hop or, be done for the day by that point. But
yeah. And Mike did ask a good question. He said, any idea if the Hollywood Studios crowds were lower on the nights of Jollywood? I don't know that the mornings were slow, but I will say the afternoons kind of leading up to Jollywood did slow down a little. But it wasn't anything like what we see at Magic Kingdom with that crowd difference.
No, and it was really interesting because, when we got there early for Jollywood, still everybody was in the park, so the lines were just long. So there wasn't, anything for us to do. I'm hoping that changes if they repeat that event again this year, that they have some food or something available for people who come early for the party but don't want to go on rides necessarily because they're dressed up. So,
right.
Just saying.
Right. Yeah. And we went a little bit later than you went to Jollywood. Like, I think we went to the third weekend or the third night of it. And we saw a lot of the same. There wasn't like the lines weren't super short yet, and there wasn't the food yet. We ended up opting to go to Fantasmic because my kids had never seen it and because it had been gone for so long. So we went to Fantasmic to fill in some of that time. So we didn't have a big gap that we were waiting. But we didn't notice the crowds really clearing out until after Fantasmic was over. Yeah. And the park closed to the day guests.
Yeah. So it's definitely not like Magic Kingdom in that instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So that's Walt Disney World for crowds. We are going to circle back for weather in a few minutes.
Yes.
But I think we should hop over to Disneyland and just give a few points about crowds in general in Disneyland before we kind of go month per month for everything. So I'm probably going to do most of the talking here just because.
Go for it. You know best. I have not been, so I trust you.
Let's run through this because I want to be sensitive of time as well. So Disneyland, like I said, is a locals park. It tends to be people who are local or somewhat local that are going to Disneyland most often. That doesn't mean people don't come from out of town. Obviously they do. But Disneyland is designed specifically kind of for those locals. And it's always been that way since Disneyland first opened. Walt Disney had a lot of local clubs and international groups that were heavily involved in the park. And so they kind of carry some of those traditions on today as well. So for Disneyland, the weekends tend to be the busiest. This is actually kind of different, almost opposite from Disney World, because people tend to be traveling in or out on Saturday and Sunday, right? But in Disneyland, the weekends are when the locals are not at work, so they tend to come into the parks. So that means a lot of the lower level passes are also blocked out, though, for this. So it's a really interesting time because the lower level passes are blocked out, but still a lot of the locals still have their passes. So weekends tend to be busier. Weekdays are usually lighter crowds, but only in the morning to early afternoon. Once locals get off of work, they usually come to Disneyland to hang out and have fun and have dinner. So you will want to get everything you want to get done, do it early in the day, wake up early, get there early, do all that stuff, because it does get so crowded in the afternoon, evening in Disneyland. On days, if lower level Magic Keys are blocked out, which is a lot of the summer, holidays, weekends for some of those passes, that can make crowds lower in the parks overall because those locals can't get in, which is interesting. I feel like we saw that last summer, like their summer levels were actually pretty low for a lot of their weeks because of all those passes being blocked out. So you can
so interesting to me that that's what happened and that they continued with the blockouts and didn't lift them. They should make some of those like good to go days like in Disney World, but they're heavily into their reservation system, and I don't know if they'll ever let go of it by this point. So those of you who don't know, Disneyland's annual pass program, the Magic Key program, is really different than the one in Disney World in that they will also penalize you if you don't show up. If you make a reservation and you don't show up, you can get penalized for it in Disneyland. So that's if you've ever seen crazy.
If you've ever seen those content creators that just go and they drive and they just check in and they turn around and walk out,
tap in and walk out
because they have to, So anyway, all that's to say, you can check the Magic Key calendar on Disneyland website, or also Touring Plans does notate which ones are blocked out any given dates in their calendar, which is actually really helpful. Yeah, I don't like it either. Kat saying that they don't like that. I don't either. I have so much anxiety about missing reservations.
I'm curious what it's like. It's like a strike system, right? Like they'll revoke your park privileges, right? If you miss so many days or something.
Yeah, I haven't memorized it because all I know is I don't ever miss them. I just don't. So, but I feel like it's three. I think if you get 3 strikes, then it's like a 30-day kind of like you can't get in the parks for 30 days. Yeah. So it's serious. Like you don't want to be blocked out for 30 days from something you're paying for. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I thought too.
It's not fun.
But it's like, like a 3 strikes and you're out of here for an amount of time. That
didn't used to be that way. Didn't used to have reservations. You used to just be able to go whenever you want and everybody was treated the same, but we're not in that land anymore.
No, we are not.
So for Disneyland, Disneyland typically does not have shorter hours in winter like Walt Disney World. You'll see Disneyland often be open till 11 or 12 p.m. Or a.m., 12 a.m., 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. because they are locals. This is the time when they have to go is after work. So you'll see it be open pretty late most of the time. California Adventure closes a little bit earlier most nights. Mm-hmm. So the best times to visit Disneyland per undercover tourist, and again, I do agree with these. These are great suggestions. January, beginning and end of February, beginning of March, weekdays in May, weekdays in early June, the second half of September, mid-November, I'd say early November, I'd throw that in too, and also early December. So my personal recommendations, my favorite times to go to Disney, it's usually February, late September, and any weekday in May. May is like my favorite. It's purple trees are out and it's beautiful. So, but I always with the caveat of you have to know what's happening with those magic keys. That's always an important thing to note, and what's happening with any special events. So Disneyland, something that they have more of than Disney World is these after hours nighttime events. So there's Sweethearts Night. We'll go through this month per month to kind of give you a heads up, but there's Sweethearts Night and Star Wars Night, those kinds of things. There's more than that, but so in the daytime that can sometimes lower the crowds in whatever park it's in.
Yeah.
But then you'd need to have like a park hopper ticket to hop over to the other park, because I don't even think Disney lets you buy a one park per day ticket in a park that's having a special event at night, from what I remember.
That would make sense, but yeah, I don't know. I've never tried before, so I don't know.
Well, we tried recently. we tried doing that because my dad had a one park per day ticket, and he didn't even have it as an option to get that park on a night that had Sweethearts Night going on. So
yeah,
they know that you're going to get kicked out of the park early, so they don't want you to lose that time. So they just don't make it an option for you to buy it.
No, you mean they actually like thought and considered for a minute that they wanted to make sure you could get the most for your money? What?
I don't know. They probably have their own reasons. They probably just want to not have as many people in there.
Deal with angry people and having to kick more people out of the park and having to make the other parks overly crowded.
That, yeah, having to get everybody out. I will also say Disneyland uses the off season in winter. Notice, like we said, January is good and February is good. All those times, though, in the off season is when they refurb their rides. So lots and lots and lots and lots of construction walls in Disneyland. Anybody who's visited recently knows that it's just walls. There's walls everywhere, and a lot of things are down and a lot of things are closed. So if you have some rides that are your absolute favorites, make sure before you book a trip in that time period that ride's going to be open, because a lot of them go down for refurbishment at that time.
Yes, and Disney World is the same. I had that written down somewhere. I don't know where it went in my notes, but Disney World is the same way, especially for water rides. In the winter months, they almost always get their refurbs during that time, but others as well. So,
right, and the water parks are closed usually in the winter too, right? For some part of the winter,
for a brief time, but they've been trying to like cycle through which water park is open when, because they very rarely have both open at the same time.
Yeah. And I'm excited for next year that they're going to allow resort guests on the day they check in to actually go to the water parks for free, included in your park stay, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a huge change.
Very interesting. I'm interested to see how that goes. You know what I mean? Just like what like how many people actually use it, and is it
probably
because it's hard, because when you get in at, let's say you get in at 2:00, you probably don't have time because the water parks still close at like 5. So
that's true. I didn't really think about that. You'd have to get in early.
I thought about that the other day. Yeah, it has to really be like an early morning arrival, and then at that point you may end up going to the parks anyway. So like that's what I'm curious to see.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of people that are I have noticed, I think this is why the Magic Kingdom is not as crowded on the weekends. I think there's a lot less people that can afford more days for their ticket because the tickets are so expensive that I think a lot of people are prioritizing, like, they're not doing half days if they have to pay for a ticket. If it's like, if they're annual pass holder, different story, but most people aren't, you know? So I feel like there's a lot of people that probably would take advantage of that if they got in early enough to do it.
Yes.
And that is the kicker.
Yeah, and I agree. Our friend Lemuel from Magic Bands and Trash Cans is saying, I wish they gave you a water park ticket instead so you could just plan it in your trip rather than having to go on that day. That would be nice. But that would probably lose the company more money than they're willing to let it. So they're just going to pretend like it's this awesome, amazing perk that only like 20% of families can use.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I hadn't really thought of that way, but it's true. It makes it sound like it's like, oh, it's such a generous, awesome, amazing thing. But if only so many people can use it, that is kind of a bummer. So,
yeah, and Hope makes a good point now. Sundays at the water parks are going to be really crowded.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is true.
So
you're traveling on a
that's what I'm saying. I'm just really interested to see how that shake. Maybe it won't. Maybe we're wrong. You know, I don't know. Who knows?
I know. It'll be interesting to watch. Yeah, it happens. Yes, for sure.
Yes, I think so.
All right, Jackie. Are we ready?
We did the crowd
transition.
I think so.
Okay.
I hope so. Let's talk some weather.
Let's do it.
This is part 2 of this episode, and yes, it was something that I think asked daily in the Disney content world that we kind of all exist in, is what's the weather like in February? What's the weather like?
Ask me that while I'm live streaming, September. And I'm like, I don't have it like an Apple Watch or anything, and I'm like, I don't know. I have to try to pull out my other phone. Like, it feels like it's like 71.
It's warm.
It's sunny with chance of showers. Is that anyway? Let's talk about weather.
Well, this morning it told me that it was going to do this, but that could change.
My lumbago is acting up, so I look at it. It's going to rain. It's not going to rain. All right.
Literally. So let's talk just some general weather things for Disney World briefly, and then we'll talk a few for Disneyland, and then we'll hop into our month-to-month kind of rundown for you guys. Yes. So Disney World, a couple general weather things to keep in mind. Hurricane season at Walt Disney World officially runs June 1st through November 30th, which I did not realize it was that long of a window.
It's like half the year almost. Yeah.
Yeah, so anytime June 1st through November 30th. Now, the highest risk is typically mid-August through like the end of October-ish.
That's when I've always thought it was.
Yes. Like so fall. That's where we see the most activity when it comes to those bad storms. Another thing to keep in mind is pretty much from March through October, always be prepared for rain. It may be a downpour, it may be a tiny little sprinkle, it may say it's going to rain and then not rain at all. But you want to be prepared those months, especially ponchos, waterproof bags, waterproof shoes. Make sure you have a plan for that when it comes to those months.
Yeah, and I have recently started being on Team Umbrella, and I feel like I shouldn't tell people to do that because there's lightning in Florida, and it seems very unsafe. But they have a lot of good lightning rods around.
As you say, there's lightning rods. Yeah. Another thing to be warned of for Disney World is to just be aware of stronger sun rays down in Florida. And I feel like that's something that people don't always consider when they're visiting. Yeah. So sunscreen and reapplying sunscreen multiple times throughout the day, doing hats. Someone on our Discord had also mentioned if you're on any medication that may react to those sun rays, keep that in mind. So check in with your doctor if you're unsure if any of your medications may have reactions to UV light more so than normal. So those are all really good things.
Umbrella for blocking out the rays.
a little Mary Poppins parasol walking through the parks.
They do help, though, I have to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's true.
Anybody.
Yes, yes, also that. Here's my notice. Winter months are typically yearly refurb months for water rides. See, I knew I wrote it down somewhere.
There it is. There it is. Yeah.
So yes, keep that in mind. And yes, our friend Victoria says bucket hats for shade. She's a big bucket hat fan, so I think that's a good plan when it comes to that. So just a couple general tips for weather at Disney World.
So over in Disneyland, really different weather. Like really, really different weather.
Yep.
So the rainy season in Disneyland is in the winter time. Usually December to March, you'll see most of the rain. But rain is also possible October to April. So fall to spring, there's still only a handful of rainy days per month, even in the rainy season. So don't think like, oh my gosh, it's going to rain every day of my trip. It might if they have a storm blow through. That's usually how it is on the West Coast here. We get storms that blow in from the coast. Like we get the Pineapple Express that comes from Hawaii. Like those are the things we get here.
Do they really call it the Pineapple Express?
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
Oh my gosh,
it's a warm rain. Yes, it's a Pineapple Express.
Heard that, but I also live in Ohio, so you don't
get the Pineapple Express very often.
I do not. No, we just get like the tail end of every tropical storm that comes through Florida because it all works its way straight up and out. So
yeah, we don't get that. So
yeah.
So when it does rain, it's usually accompanied with a storm that's coming through, and that can sometimes reduce park hours. So this is kind of a difference with Walt Disney World. They will reduce park hours or cancel days if it's a very severe hurricane, like really severe. If they're just getting bands of weather, they're not canceling or reducing anything. They're very used to rain there. It's not a thing. Yeah. But in Disneyland, it's a little bit less prepared for rain because of Southern California. And they also have flash floods possibilities and stuff. So for everybody's safety, for also the cast members that have to make it home and things like that, they sometimes have reduced hours. So Disneyland's also usually dry all summer. This is one of the reasons Disney did some very specific strategic scouting of where to make these things. Obviously he wanted to make Disneyland in Burbank originally, so he wanted to be one that's nearby. But they did do a lot of studies about what the weather was like when they made Disneyland. Also, when they made Florida, they wanted to know that it was a place that was going to make sense and didn't rain very much. And that is true of Anaheim. It is dry as a bone all summer. It's not humid most days. It is very dry. Same is true up here in Oregon. It doesn't rain all summer. People think it rains all the time in Oregon. I was like, we have 3 months of zero rain, no single drops of rain all summer long. So there's no afternoon thunder showers to worry about. You don't have to worry about waterproof shoes and whatnot. Just be prepared for it to be hot. And it's a dry heat. You also get this marine overcast cloud cover because you're kind of ish near the ocean, weather-wise. You're not that far from the ocean. So you do get this interesting thing we have that's called this marine overcast cloud cover in the morning that burns off by the afternoon. So if you go in the morning, sometimes it might be like a little chilly or it might be overcast. The afternoon, you're going to be sweating. You're going to be losing those layers. So just note that just because it looks overcast in the morning, probably it's not going to stay there all day.
Yeah, that's helpful to know because I had no idea that was a thing until you told me about it. And I was like,
yeah,
fascinating.
Yeah, they also have a lot of pollution there. So the color of the sky is really different. And that's why they had to recreate their blending blue paint when they made Florida because the sky color is completely different. Anyway, the other thing to know about Disneyland is it has something called the Santa Ana winds that it gets impacted by. So when the Santa Ana winds kick up, it can make it just really super windy in the parks, very, very breezy. The trees are bending over, it's just breezy. This usually happens between October and February, March, with December having the highest frequency. So again, it happens in those winter months usually. Summer events are extremely rare for Santa Ana winds, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. And when it happens, it usually happens in the evening, but every once in a while it can be kind of an all-day kind of gusty thing. And so it's like 30 to 40 miles per hour winds with like gusts to 50 miles per hour. It's
crazy. It'll blow my children away.
So you just when it happens, you just kind of I've been there so often when it's windy and you just kind of get used to it and you roll with it, but you definitely need to tie your hair up and stuff because it's just your hair is in your face while you're trying to go on the rides. The other thing is that a lot of people know about Disneyland is the high altitude wind can and does cancel fireworks very often. And this is usually when it feels like perfectly calm down below. You're not feeling any wind, but all those winds way up higher than you, they're keeping track of those right up to the second of when they start the fireworks show. So sometimes they don't call it off till right before it's going to begin. And they're like, due to high altitude winds, and everybody goes, no,
no, boo.
Yeah. But the fireworks also do not happen on school nights because this is a residential area. So if local kids are going to school the next day, they're not going to have fireworks. Disney does negotiate for the amount of days they can have fireworks during the year with the city of Anaheim. And they also negotiate during Christmas time, like how many shows they can have around Christmas time. So there's a few more in December than there are the rest of the year. And that's part of their contract with Anaheim that they're allowed to do that. So
that makes sense. So fireworks are more frequent like during the summer then too, if the kids are not in school typically.
Yeah. So the fireworks happen in the summer pretty much every night except for those high altitude winds nights. So it's typically, yeah, they do have a specific number of nights that they're allowed to do it legally with the city of Anaheim. And so they don't have them every single night. That's why if you've ever been to Disney kind of like in the off season and it's like Mickey's Mixed Magic is going on, but there's just projections and there's no fireworks, that is why, because it's their contract with the city of Anaheim for school nights. And so if there are if it's spring break or something like that, they can definitely do fireworks. But if the kids are going to school, then they can't do it. So
there you go. Yep. I always knew that it was important to check for fireworks schedules at Disneyland, but now I know more as to why. Thank you, Kate.
Yes. And the fireworks do impact also the operations in the parks. And we've talked about this with, Fantasyland closing for a good portion of the late evening because they have to make sure it's safe to reopen with the fire marshal before they can allow people back in the area, just because it's such a compact area, and they have to make sure everything's safe. So
yeah, that makes sense. Alrighty, shall we jump into our month to month?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, a lot of this information when it comes to the weather, for sure, I gathered from Undercover Tourist because they have like a historical average of highs and lows for every single day of the month. So they definitely track all of that. So I kind of just took some ranges to give you guys some weather information. The other thing to keep in mind is if you're looking weather-wise, they do the Undercover Tourist calendar has a lot of filter options on it, so keep that in mind too. So if you're looking for good weather and low crowds, you can sort by that kind of on their calendar. So that was something that I found to be helpful as I was looking through doing all of this research. So wanted to share that with everyone here.
So let's start out in January. And Jackie, do you want to do Walt Disney World and then I'll do Disneyland all the way down?
Perfect.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. And we're going to run through this kind of quickly. The good news is this will be available on the Chip and Go podcast network here in a few short weeks and also available on our feed. So if you need to go back whenever you are actually planning a trip to reference what we're talking about, it will be there for you. So yay for that. So let's talk about January at Walt Disney World. As far as weather goes, you're looking at highs ranging anywhere from 65 to 85, and that sounds like kind of a wide range. You're going to find that a lot at in Disney World and a little bit in Disneyland too when it comes to some of these months, but it's just too hard to predict some of these winter months. A couple things crowd calendar wise that we're going to just touch on briefly since we're going month to month. At Disney World, the National Cheer Competition is typically in January. This last year, it was the 12th through the 14th. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, again, holiday to avoid. And Run Disney, they had the marathon weekend from January 8th through 12th, and that is the date for 2025. So keep those things in mind for January.
Kind of like mid-January is a dicey one.
Yeah. So if you can squeeze in a trip like right after New Year's, but before like whenever the Run Disney is, that's probably your best time in January to go.
Yeah.
Or right at the end.
And we won't get into the weeds here with the cheer competitions. And this is no offense to anybody who is a cheer family, not at all.
Nope.
But they do have massive crowds with big groups of people that are hard to walk around. And if you're in a value resort, it gets loud sometimes. So I will say that.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's worth knowing when the cheer competitions are happening in the parks for that reason.
Yes. And I will note that you can look that up on there is a separate website for the ESPN Wild World of Sports, which is the sports complex on Disney property. They have a whole separate website and calendar that it's very easy to find. I Googled it and it was the first thing that popped up. So if you're wondering, is there anything going on? Check there, as well as cross-referencing with other places too.
Yes. Did you do the weather already for Disney World?
I did, yes.
Okay. All right. So
sorry, I went out of order.
All right. So for Disneyland in January, crowd-wise, we have a Run Disney event. The Disneyland Marathon this past year was January 11th to 14th. So similar to Disney World in that kind of mid-time. And then Disneyland also has Sweethearts Nights, and there are multiple dates, usually both in January and February. At least they have been for the last couple of years. So it's hard to predict what dates those will be. So you just keep on the lookout for those, because those will impact at least what park you can go to. I wouldn't say you would have to plan your trip on not going those weeks, because I've gone those weeks and they're fine, but just be aware of that. And then for the weather, the highs usually range from 59 to 68, and it is rainy season in January. So be aware for that.
Perfect. All right, let's talk February. Like I said, we're going to just keep on pushing through these for you guys. So in Disney World, a couple crowd things to keep in mind for February. Again, more of these kind of dance and cheer competitions. High school dance competition this year was February 2nd through 4th. High school cheer competition was February 9th through the 12th. We've got President's Day in February, and then the Run Disney Princess Weekend this last year was February 22nd through the 26th. So February, you're gonna have a hard time of completely avoiding most things that third week, maybe right after President's Day, before Run Disney. But even then, this year it was pretty busy almost the entire month of February.
Yeah. All right.
Weather in February. Sorry, I know there's too many things to keep track of. The highs in February range anywhere from 67 to 86. So quite a wide range again there with those winter months for Disney World.
I feel like Disney World can also just be super unpredictable in those winter months. About one day it'll be 80 something, and the next day it'll be 40 in the morning, and you just you just have to I feel like I have to bring my entire wardrobe in the wintertime to Florida.
Yeah. Well, if you just keep in mind on those days that the high is only 67, it's in the 40s in the morning. So you really got to make sure you're looking at the whole range of weather forecast, the lows and the highs, because you cannot in the summer more, you can basically base it more off of what the high is going to be for each day.
It's going to be hot
in those winters. Yeah. But in those winter months, you especially need to look at the lows as well to make sure that you're planning enough layers so that you'll be warm enough in your early morning when you go into the park.
It's true. Yeah. I always have to carry a sweater, and then I just take it off during the day and stuff it in my Loungefly. Just really fun. Anyway, so Disneyland in February, again, the crowds, it's mostly just Sweethearts Night, and a lot of those refurbs are happening in February. So just be aware that there might be a lot of things that are closed. Weather-wise, highs range from 53 to 72. So it does get pretty pleasant in, the afternoon, as long as it's not raining at all. But it is rainy season, so you might get a couple of days of rain in that month. Not a lot, but a couple. So
there you go. All right, let's talk about March. So March at Disney World, a couple crowd things to keep in mind. Spring break season starts mid-month in March. And again, it's unpredictable as to when, but typically the second to third week of March is when you're going to start to see the ebb and flow and influx of those spring break crowds. It pretty much runs through about mid-April, but again, that depends on Easter. So if you find that Easter's later, you may have some straggly spring break crowds all the way through the end of April in that instance. So this year, Easter, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Sorry. Easter is right around the corner, March 31st. right around the corner from when we're recording this, at least I should say. So do keep that in mind whenever visiting. Those weeks surrounding Easter this year are going to be and have already proven to be very, very busy.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the weather ranges, the highs range anywhere from 65 to 88. So again, kind of standard to what we've seen already so far in the winter months, a little bit warmer into March as we go more towards summer.
Yes. I'd say March is probably my favorite month to go to Walt Disney World, except for the spring break crowds. Like early March is like my favorite weather-wise. It was like perfect when I was there. For Disneyland in March, for the crowds, you can expect there's a couple. It kind of is an event that has changed recently. So last year it was Throwback Night. This year it was Disney Channel Night. But they kind of this is like the one that they switch up and decide to try something new on. But there is the After Hours event, typically in March, and then spring break crowds, which are different dates usually than the East Coast. West Coast has very different dates. Locally to California, it's typically the week before and or the week after Easter. So it depends on like where you're at, what school you're at. But much of the West Coast, typically spring break is usually the end of March, like the last week of March. That's usually so. And a lot of people from Oregon, Washington will also go down to Disneyland during spring break. That happens too. So it's not just California. You have to kind of look at also Arizona. People come over from Arizona and Nevada, like, anywhere on the West, what their spring break is like. So weather for Disneyland in March is the highest range from 55 to 68, which is interesting. That was like a little bit cooler than February. So I don't know. That was kind of interesting for me. But this
could be the way the wind comes through or something. Who knows, right?
This is also kind of the end of the rainy season. So you might see a day or two of rain here, but usually it starts to taper off in March. So the weather is actually pretty pleasant most of March.
There you go. So keep that in mind. March sounds like it, weather-wise, is pretty decent on both ends of the country.
Yeah, just maybe not crowd-wise. That's the balance.
Weather-wise. All right, let's move on to April. April in Disney World. A couple crowd things to keep in mind. We did mention earlier, but Easter 2025 will be April 20th. So it is really, really late. So again, those spring break Easter crowds, we'll have to just kind of see what happens with that. So we may see an extension of that spring break season. There is the Run Disney Springtime Surprise event that this year is being held April 18th through the 21st of 2024. And then cheerleading
right around
dance.
Easter.
Oh, that is. Well, if they keep it the same dates next year, it will be Easter weekend. I think they'll probably have to adjust that. I don't think they want to do that. And then the Cheerleading and Dance Worlds is April 26th through the 29th, 2024.
So maybe just don't go in late April next year if you want to avoid crowds.
Yeah.
That would be my advice.
Yeah, and I don't know if it'll be interesting to see if early and mid-April, if we have an influx of spring break crowds in March and then it dips down for a couple weeks and then goes back up again. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And then the weather in April, we truly hit some of those warmer temperatures because the highs can range anywhere from 72 to 90 in April. And I have been there in April when it's been in the 70s the whole time and beautiful. And I've been there in April when it's been in the upper 80s the whole time and miserable. So April is one of those months where, for whatever reason, it's very up and down when it comes to the weather. So,
yeah.
Fun.
So for Disneyland for April, again, Easter, we already mentioned that. So Easter is kind of a busier time for Disneyland as well. We also have some Star Wars nights that start in April for Disneyland. So keep an eye out for those. Otherwise, crowds aren't that bad except for around the Easter time. So you can kind of, and if it's spring break, that's also dependent on that, right? And then weather-wise, the highs range from 64 to 90. So we're definitely starting to head into a warmer season. It's mostly dry, just a chance of rain here and there, but most likely going to be sunny your entire trip.
Yep. Alrighty, May in Walt Disney World. Let's talk about a couple crowd things. Mother's Day. Again, Mother's Day is not a massively busy holiday, but because it is a Sunday, you will see more crowds on that Sunday when we typically have talked about historically weekends are a little bit slower at like Magic Kingdom. So do keep that in mind. Memorial Day is a big one. It's always very busy around Memorial Day. So again, holidays. They do have a big Memorial Day soccer tournament at ESPN that's like middle school and high school, I think, when I was looking it up. So that helps with the crowds being extra busy when it comes to Memorial Day.
Right.
Other things in May to look out for is the Cheer and Dance Summit is May 2nd through the 12th this year. So that's, I don't know if that's like their worlds, but it's a big competition and it's like several weekends long.
Anytime they use the word summit, you just think it's going to be a lot
sounds, yeah, that sounds important. So I don't know enough about cheer and dance, but there's that for your planning purposes in May. The weather in May, the highs range anywhere from 80 to 93. But I will say in May overall, I went this past May and the temperatures were fairly reasonable. It was warm, but it wasn't like grossly warm and sticky. You don't quite hit the humidity in May.
Pleasant. Yeah, it depends. Sometimes you'll hit like a weekend, you're like, it's really hot.
Yeah.
But I enjoy May in both parks. Like May is a fabulous time to go, both Disneyland, Disney World, in my opinion. So
Right.
Okay, so for Disneyland in May, there's a lot going on. I feel like May truly is just a month that always has a lot going on. It's like the second December, right? Like December's always got a million things going on. May is like that too. So there's a lot of grad nights at California Adventure. So keep an eye on those on the calendar because then you're not going to have the option to go to that park unless you're going to grad night. Mother's Day is actually not very crowded in Disneyland. And at least in the past when I've been there on Mother's Day, because I was a mom, they gave me like a little carnation, which was really sweet. So I got a little flower.
So cute.
Yeah, I don't know if they've ever done it in Disney World, but they did do it in Disneyland, which was made me feel seen, which was very special. And then Memorial Day and Star Wars nights are also happening in May in Disneyland as well. There's a lot of them this year. Like they didn't sell out instantly because they have a lot of them. Then weather in May is highs range from 63 to 85. It is dry usually the entire time, and it is definitely one of my picks for best months to go to Disneyland.
You heard it here, folks. But don't all go in May because then it'll be crowded and Kate will be sad.
I would be. Well, you guys can go, but like not the whole world. So.
Don't tell anyone else. This is just here. This is just here. Just Mom Street. That's it. All right, let's hop into the summer months here. Let's talk about June at Disney World. Really the only big thing to look out for is Father's Day. And again, similar to what we said for Mother's Day, might see a little bit of heightened crowds for that day, but really nothing too major. The weather in June, the highs range from 83 to 96, so you will start to feel that heat. May and then also really into June and July is when you really start to see those almost daily afternoon downpours. So just again, be ready for that to happen. Even if it's not on the weather forecast, it may still happen unexpectedly. So just be ready for it every day.
Yes. Disneyland, the crowds for June, they do have Pride Nights so that's their after hours events. And they have Father's Day also at Disneyland. I don't remember what they did. I feel like we went for Father's Day one year, but I don't remember if they gave something to the men. It might have just been for Mother's Day. I'm not sure. The weather for June, the highs range from 65 to 79. It's definitely starting to get warm up, but it's not like super, super hot yet. And it is dry. There's not hardly any rain in June most times, unless it's some weird weather event.
Which is so interesting to me because like it's the complete opposite of Disney World.
No rain. Yeah. That's why everything goes brown in California at that point because there's no water. So
right.
The drought conditions.
Yeah. All right, let's talk July in Disney World. Crowd wise, holidays, 4th of July. Again, we talked briefly about this earlier in the episode. could be busier, may not be terrible as far as holidays go, just because it is like one of the hottest months at Disney World. So you may or may not see increased crowds that day. Again, with the weather, the highs are 88 to 96 generally, and it's that afternoon rain. You're definitely going to see it pretty much every day in July.
For Disneyland in July, I don't have a lot of notes about the crowds, except that if the passes are blocked out, then it's probably not going to be as crowded. But you also have to balance that out with a lot of the people that are out of school, But I've seen last year we didn't see it be terribly crowded in the summertime, which was really interesting because that was different than when before they had this tiered pass system. It was definitely crowded in the summer with all the kids out of school. So very different situation that the passes have created in Disneyland with that. But it is considered like peak season. So they have all their rides usually open in the summertime and whatnot, as long as they're not open for an extended like refurb right then. The weather is usually the highest range from 69 to 80. So it's definitely getting hotter, and it is dry and hot in the afternoon. So you have to really try to seek shade. Which luckily there is a lot usually at Disneyland, but you can get very dehydrated very fast, even if it's dry heat. So
yeah, definitely hydrate. Lots of water, no matter what, even if you don't feel like you need it. Okay, so that brings us to August. August in Walt Disney World. Again, not a ton happening in August. Still kind of busy that maybe the first week, but then pretty much after that, you've got kids that go back to school. So crowd-wise, a pretty good month to go. It is still very hot, though. The highs are still in 88 to 96 when it comes to August. And we do sometimes see the Halloween parties start, or at least I think we have historically seen like the very, very end of August into September with some of those dates. So do keep in mind that as well.
Yeah. For Disneyland, the crowds in August again are pretty much, it's going to be almost a repeat of July. It's a flat out repeat for what's happening with pass holders. Again, everybody's still out of school at this point on the West Coast. So it's not the same as like if you went to Walt Disney World in the end of August, a lot of kids are back in school, so the crowds might be later. That might not be the same on the West Coast, so don't think that'll be the same. And then the weather is highest range from 71 to 85, and it is dry and hot, no rain. So.
All right, September in Disney World, really just Labor Day crowd-wise that you need to look out for when it comes to different events and things. And again, we talked about it may be busy, it may not. It's kind of one of those questionable ones because it really depends on schools and kids going back to school, things like that. The weather, the highs range from 75 to 95. So we do see a little bit more on the low end.
Oh, it's so hot in September.
You also will see that swing still to those like summer heat days as well. So
yeah, like a couple years ago, I spent 2 weeks there in September. I think it was the first 2 weeks of September, and it was so hot. It was really hot all the time. But I did have someone ask, how is it like Disney September 21st? Is that a good time? It is for crowds. It's going to be hot, but it's usually the end of September is a great time to go because the crowds are typically lighter then. So yes.
Yeah.
In Disneyland in September, there is a Run Disney event. The Disneyland Halloween half is September 5th to 8th in 2024. So we do have that event going on. And again, after Labor Day is when all the kids go back to school on the West Coast. So it's really usually pretty nice in September. And even though the highs range from 72 to 90, I feel like I really like the weather in September because it's just starting to like slightly turn towards fall, and you start to feel that change towards fall, and it just is I don't know, I just love that time of year. So
yeah. And something that I should mention that somehow we didn't mention in September is a big month for Halloween parties on both ends of the country. So if you're looking for that type of event, that that can alter the crowds because you will see some fluctuation day to day with those party days like we talked about earlier. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and Disneyland would be Oogie Boogie, whereas it would be Halloween. Yeah, Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party over in Disney World. So,
yes. Okay, October in Disney World. Crowd calendar wise, Columbus Day. You're going to see maybe just that weekend, but then other than that, it doesn't really hang over. Typically, that's just the weekend that you see with crowds there. Halloween, like we talked about. And then there is a Run Disney event. And this date kind of makes me cringe this year because the Wine and Dine half is October 31st.
What?
Through November 3rd.
Who planned that?
I don't know.
Crazy. Those guys are going to be nuts.
I would highly advise you to avoid Halloween and like the couple days before and the days after. So it must just have to do with where it falls on
how
on the calendar. But that week in October is going to be really
crazy,
really busy. Really,
and
really busy.
That's typically what we see in October. Is it starts out slow and it builds and builds and builds until you get to Halloween. So it progressively gets busier and busier. That's pretty much how it's been since the beginning of time. I feel like it's a scene.
Yeah, so. Yeah. The weather, the highs range from 72 to 88. And I will say that weather in October can be a little bit unpredictable. We went last October, 2 Octobers ago now, and it was so hot. It felt like July.
Ugh, that's the worst.
And it was so busy that it felt like Christmas.
Oh, gosh.
It was just I think a lot of schools more are doing like a fall break type of thing in mid-October.
That's true.
And that was when we ended up going because of my kids' school schedule. And it was so busy. We waited on Main Street for the fireworks. And I remember looking at my husband going, I don't think I've ever seen this many people on Main Street for the fireworks. And we've done 4th of July, we've done Easter, we've done, a lot of other holidays. And I was like, this is crazy. And I don't know why, but it was super hot and we were not ready for it to be that hot. So October can be a little up and down.
It's like, while I like the end of September, early October for crowds, I have a comment here from Joel. It says, I usually like to go in September and it feels like peak summer, if not worse than summer. I would argue that, September and sometimes sneaker times in October feel like peak summer more than like June and early July, It's like August and September.
How that's shifted.
Tough months.
Yeah. So October is tricky. Just keep that in mind.
Disneyland in October, you might see some of those Oogie Boogie Bash nights at DCA. That's not in Disneyland proper, so it depends on your plans there. So that's the main thing that impacts crowds, as well as there's no Halloween like party in Disneyland itself, so that you're just mainly going for Disneyland, and you're not doing Oogie Boogie. It won't impact you that much, but there will be more crowds progressively towards Halloween as there are towards any of these holidays in the fall. So keep that in mind. And then the rainy season does begin in October. I would say it's not as many as later on, but you can expect that there'll be a couple days of rain in this time, and the highs range from 66 to 83. So it's starting to cool off a little bit.
Yeah. November in Disney World. As far as crowds go, Thanksgiving obviously is a big one, that week leading up to Thanksgiving and a little bit kind of afterwards. Thanksgiving is November 28th, 2024, so keep that in mind for your planning purposes. And the weather, the highs range anywhere from 65 to 88. We were there this past November, and most days I was in long sleeves. So,
yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I feel like there's definitely a couple days in the winter of this past year in Florida where it was in the 40s in the morning and I was just really cold.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Again, those mornings you got to pay attention and make sure you bring those layers.
Mm-hmm. For Disneyland in November, I would say the first 3 weeks is like one of the best times to go in the year, crowd wise. And I'd say weather-wise, except for the rainy season has begun and you might get some rain in November. So as long as you are willing to just power through if it rains, bring your rain gear. Sometimes this can be one of the best. Just don't go the week of Thanksgiving unless you're prepared for the crowds, because that week is always really, really busy. So, and the highs range from 61 to 76. So again, it can still be on, warmer, which is pleasant, but it can rain. So there you have it.
In December, we finally made it to the end at Disney World. You're just looking at Christmas and New Year's crowds. Pretty much the second week of December on through the end of the month is insane. So just keep that in mind. The weather, the highs range anywhere from 54 to 80. So again, you're going to have some cooler temperatures, especially in December. So pack the layers, keep that in mind.
Yeah. For Disneyland, the first 2 weeks of December are usually lower crowds, and then it just starts to ramp up towards Christmas and all the way through New Year's. But there are some pass holder blockout dates for some of these times. So that's something to consider too, that if a lot of the locals are blocked out because a lot of the passes are blocked out, it might not actually be as bad as it would be in like Disney World. For that reason. Which is a really weird dynamic that all these passes have like thrown into the mix for crowds. But it's going to be busy during Christmas. It just will be. So I'm not going to say it won't be. The weather in Disneyland in December, the highs range from 50, 60, 72. So it's definitely on the cooler side. And it is one of the most rainy months. So it's going to rain. But you might also get to see the snow on Main Street. It snows on Main Street. And so,
yes, it does.
It balances out the cold.
Nice.
It is nice to bundle up and have the snow, and you get some cute pictures that way. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so we have made it to the end of the calendar. I think that wraps up the majority of our content for this particular episode. Unless there's anything we forgot that you can think of, Kate.
Ooh, no, I feel like we covered it all. That was a lot. I mean, it's a lot of information, but hopefully that was helpful for you guys to kind of, if you already are thinking, well, maybe this time of year I might want to go, or if you're just like completely like, I don't really know when is the best time to go. And, obviously we're not going to tell you like, these are the best times to go. It's really about your family, what your family needs. If you don't mind heat, maybe going this summer when it's less crowded and it's hot out is not, but if you're like, I don't mind the cold, maybe going in some of these winter months, there's so much that can impact this, and also every family schedule is different. So, do what's best for your family. And I think you stated it, Jackie, but it's worth reiterating that don't let just because it's going to be crowded stop you from going and enjoying your trip. Just know what you're getting yourself into.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Shall we move on to our Ask the Moms?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so we end each of our podcast episodes with our Ask the Mom segments, where we take a question from our Mom Street community and do our best to give you kind of a short and sweet answer. So our question for tonight is, we are planning to park hop on our Disney World trip. We have a 3-day park hopper ticket. How do you suggest breaking down the parks for those 3 days?
Oh, goodness. It's always hard.
So I'm
assuming
that
only
they,
3 places.
And I'm assuming they're meaning they want to visit all 4 parks. So we'll go ahead and kind of work under that assumption. I have a thought if you want me to go ahead and start, and
please.
you can fill in the gaps. So my suggestion would be, I'm anticipating that you probably have kids if you're listening to our podcast. The majority of you have kids that you travel with, whether they are your own or nieces, nephews, whoever they may be that you're traveling with. Yes, all of the above, any children in your family. So you're definitely going to need a full day at Magic Kingdom. Regardless of a hopper, you're going to need a full day at Magic Kingdom. Yep. Now, if you want to do 2 mornings at Magic Kingdom, a morning and an evening, you can kind of decide, but I would definitely plan a full day at Magic Kingdom for sure. You could probably get away with doing like an Animal Kingdom hop to Epcot, depending on your list of
Epcot.
What I was gonna say. Depending on your list at Epcot, and what you want to accomplish there. So that would be the 2 that I would pair together. The other thing you could potentially do, depending on if you're wanting to do all of the thrill rides at Hollywood Studios, is you could start at Hollywood Studios and then hop and finish Epcot that evening if you needed to.
Yeah.
So I think my breakdown would be full day Magic Kingdom, and then I would suggest, and this is any order, but day 2, morning at Animal Kingdom, evening at Epcot, and then day 3 would be morning at Hollywood Studios, evening at Epcot.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that's great. And I would also probably encourage, if you can afford it, getting the Genie Plus to try to maximize your time there, especially because you don't have that much time with just 3 days to try to do an awful lot of things. So to try to save as much time as possible, if it's in the budget, get Genie Plus, because then you'll be able to see a lot more than otherwise, just because you will spend a lot of time waiting in line otherwise. So.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's a necessity almost at Magic Kingdom and at Hollywood Studios.
Yeah.
Again, depending on your lists at Animal Kingdom and Epcot, you may or may not feel like you need it. Animal Kingdom, if you get there early and it's not Christmas time, you can probably hit the majority of what you want if you rope drop Flight of Passage, and you don't want to spend money on Genie Plus. You can probably still manage for the most part. You may end up in like a 30 to 40 minute wait for 1 or 2 attractions, but it just depends on your list. Again, Epcot, if you want to do Frozen and Remy, you're going to need to use Genie Plus, because those lines are going to be...
Just wait a long time, and that's probably all we'll do there.
An hour to hour and a half to 2 hours for those ones.
Line.
So
yeah.
So that would be our suggestion.
And I do know Genie Plus prices have been going up and creeping up, and I have a feeling they're going to continue to do so. If I had anything like to predict it, and I don't want it to happen. But I think,
unfortunately,
I think it will probably continue to creep up, and it's just now something we just have to try to budget into a cost of a Disney vacation. This is something you're going to need to buy for your family every day, or you're really not going to get to go on a whole lot of things.
Right. I just wish they would go back to Disney World being allowed to add it to your package when you book for budgeting purposes. I feel like I wish, but I know.
I know, because it's painful. It's a painful purchase to do on the day of. Like, they probably would benefit from having it just be like, oh, we just add it into your package. Right. You have to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. But
when you're doing it for a whole family, I'm like, I'm bracing myself for my family of 5. I'm like,
on your family trip, it's Yep. Yeah. That's when you just like click it and close your eyes and don't look at it until later and just know.
Yeah, like we just have to, because otherwise you just don't get to go on that much. You're just standing in line all day, and especially if it's hot out and you're just miserable and everybody's so it is just what it is.
Not worth it.
Yeah,
it's not.
But no, I agree with your plan too. That sounds like a great park hopping plan. I agree with yours, Jackie. I wouldn't add anything.
All right. Well, hey, look at that. Well, we always appreciate your questions for our Ask the Mom segment. We love hearing from you guys, and we are more than happy to answer your questions. So if you've got a question for a future Ask the Mom segment, please send it our way. You can find us on our good friend Kirk's Discord, the Walrus Carp Pocket Fam Discord. The link to that is up in... Ooh, I'm mirrored. There we go. Up in the bio up there. You can reach out to us on social media. We are on all the places. And our email is momstreetusa@gmail.com if you prefer that method. We always love to hear from you. We are always more than happy to answer any questions you guys have about planning your trip.
Yes, absolutely. And if you need a little bit of extra help, Jackie is not a travel agent, but she is a travel consultant, and she's also a bit of a Genie Plus expert. And so she can do a lot to help you plan some itineraries and plan out your day and figure out Genie Plus as well. So you can contact her via our Mom Street USA channels. So if you need
happy to help. Happy to help. It's always fun. And even if you just need advice, I don't want you to ever feel like, oh, if I ask her a question, she's going to charge me. No, that's not how I run things.
How we do this.
No. If you've got questions or you're like, I need advice on this, please send us your questions. We are more than happy to help. We've gotten a few emails from time to time that we are able to help give you guys some guidance and some feedback. And some of them I text Kate like, Kate, this is Disneyland. I need you to chime in. I only got like this much and I need way more. So we are more than happy to help you guys as always. Please feel free to reach out to us.
Yes, of course. So with that being said, where are we headed next? What are we doing next?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, next week, our next topic is we're going to talk about how to be pregnant at Disney, which I think goes perfectly after our weather and crowd episode. So that is coming up on our next podcast episode. We will be tackling how to be pregnant at the Disney parks.
We will not be pregnant, but we will talk about being
We will talk
about
very
it.
Clear. I have taken several trips previously in my previous pregnancies with my children. So we will be happy to shed some light on that.
And as always, thank you guys for just being part of this community. It's really important to us that this be a place that has not only has some women's voices in the mix when it comes to helping people plan Disney vacations and also as Disney content creators. And we really appreciate all of your support. And also you guys are here for us as much as we're here for you. And we really appreciate that so much. So thank you for being part of Mom Street USA.
Yes. And if you're looking for more Mom Street when we finish our podcast, Kate has redone a whole webpage for us on her Disney Cicerone page. So you can find all sorts of Mom Street goodies over there, including our merch, our guides, our water guides, our one-day park strategy guides, our planning guide, all of the things that we have created for our community all live there. We also have a brand new newsletter that we have been kind of pilot testing out these first couple months of this year to kind of play with and figure out, to give you guys some additional information that way as well. You can find the links to all of that in our bio, so feel free to check that out. Or if you can't find something you're looking for, send us a message.
Yes, DisneyCicerone.com/MomStreetUSA if anybody's looking for all of those resources. And all that being said, I think that was a lot, but I think that's it. I think we did it.
We did it. Yes.
Alrighty. So shall we wrap up?
Yes, I got this. I'll do it this time. I'm ready.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of Mom Street USA. We hope that the information we provided about weather and crowd and calendars can be super helpful for you when you're planning your future trips. Kate, any last words of wisdom for today?
Go and enjoy your trip whenever you can plan it. Don't worry too much about the crowds and the weather. Just have a wonderful time with your family.
I love that. That's so cute. Well, we hope you all have a wonderful week, and we will catch you on the next episode of Mom Street USA. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.